Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tea with Tara. Today's guest should look very familiar to you. She's best known for playing Nellie Oleson on the hit TV show Little House on the Prairie. But Alison Arngrim traded in her prairie bonnet a long time ago. Now she's a woman who wears many hats: actress, author, activist. She does it all, and we're going to talk about it. Alison, welcome.
Oh, thank you. And it's so funny. It's tea with Tara. And oh, look, I have a cup of tea. I do. I actually have a cup of hot green tea.
Well, first I want to start. Let me first begin with the beginning. As Julie Andrews said, let's start at the very beginning.
At the
A very
beginning.
good place to start. Tell me a little about your background and how you got into show business.
Well, I was sort of born into it. My whole family were in show business. A lot of people out there do know who my mother. My mother was Norma Macmillan, and she was a cartoon voiceover person. She was the voice of Casper the Friendly Ghost, Gumby, Sweet Polly Purebred, Underdog's Girlfriend, and Davy of Davy and Goliath. So I love Casper, some things up there. So yeah, the whole family was in show business. And my parents actually met in the theater in Canada. So by the time I think I had my Screen Actors Guild card says member since 1967 when I was five. So my first union job was five. I've been at the commercial, I think. So I was working as a very young child. And really up until I was seven, I kind of thought everybody was on TV because all their friends were on television. It's like, everyone's on TV. And I started doing commercials and episodes of things. There was a great show called Juvenile Jury back in the 60s. It was sort of like, remember, like they had Art Linkletter's Kids Say the Darndest Things. So
Right.
every network had to have their version of a bunch of smart aleck kids. So I was on Juvenile Jury for like repeatedly as a regular. So it was very crazy. And I had done a movie when I was 10. And then I wasn't working. And there's the funny part. So around 10, I do this movie. And so when I'm 11, I'm still going on auditions. And I haven't gotten it. And so my father sits me down because he's a manager and says, well, you're not really booking, and the movie should have done more for you. So I have to tell you, as an actor, as your manager, it's realism. As you know, many child stars work as little kids, and then we get to be like 10, 11, that stops, or it stops in their teens, and they may not work again till later or ever. And all actors, he says, we have actors, do a huge series or a big movie and they don't work again. You never know. He said, so you may never work again, or you might not work until much, much later after 18. So you need to be prepared for that. So I was told my career was over and I might be totally washed up at 11. And then, of course, I turned around and I got Little House in the Prairie a couple months later. So, in your face. Um, uh, People say, are you making a comeback? I go, no, Little House in the Prairie was the comeback. That was my second career. I'd already had an entire career and like stopped and then got Little House. So that was actually the comeback role.
Wow, that's amazing. And by the way, I loved Casper the Ghost. I never knew that that was your mom until recently when I read your memoir.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
loved Davy and Goliath. I would get up very early in the morning to watch that show. Absolutely loved it. So 1974, this little show called Little House on the Prairie comes along and you audition for it, but you also auditioned for the parts of Mary and Laura. Is that right?
That's what was so weird. So it was like late 73-ish, I guess, about 11. And I was constantly auditioning. I was a good little journeyman child actor, like all my friends, and you went to several auditions a week. People would say, well, how did your audition go last week? Did you get it? And I'd be like, what? I didn't even remember what the heck I read for half the time. So I went and I read for the show. I remember read for Nanny and the Professor. I read for the Waltons. I read for everything. So because I remember reading, going, Prudence, what a funny name. So I know I read for Nanny and the Professor. So I read for these characters, and I remember saying, God, I'm just not a country girl. This would no, I'm so not this one. I remember going, no way. And then of course they hired Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson for Laura and Mary, and they made the pilot, which aired in March of 74. And it was a big hit. And of course, they were perfect. And of course, Michael Landon had just come off of Bonanza. So they were like, yes, 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 it's got full speed ahead. We're doing the show. So they announced, well, now they have to cast the townspeople. Got to get the reverend and the doctor and the teacher and all the. I, of course, like an idiot, I haven't read the books. I have like no clue, not a clue. Don't know there is a Nellie Oleson. No idea. So when my agent calls and says, you guys got to go over Paramount and you need to read for Little House on the Prairie, my first thought is, no, 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 there must be a mistake. I read for Little House on the Prairie and I didn't get it. So we go down there and I'm handed the sides. And of course, it's this part of this girl, Nellie. And she's horrible. And I'd never read anything like this then, because most child actor parts then, they were good little girls. And I was a cute little blonde, blue-eyed thing. So I was always reading these sweet little girl. And here this girl is like, I don't think the country girls have a penny. What do you think, Willie? Oh, oh. So I turned to my father and said, this is not normal. This is not normal part. There's something wrong with this. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, she's a bitch. This child is a complete bitch. And my father said, what? And then I read it for him. Well, he starts laughing so hard because it's the whole, my home is the best home in all of Walnut Grove, that whole speech. So my father's dying of laughter. He says, look, I don't know what to tell you. Don't touch it. You go in, you read it exactly like that. He said, in fact, don't read it again. In fact, snatches the page and goes, put the pages face down. Don't even look at them. You go in, you do it like that. Okay. So I go in, and it's Michael Landon and Kent McChrystal, the producers in a little row. And they're very polite. They're very nice. They're smiling. And they say, go ahead. And I read, and they start cracking up. I get to the My Home speech. They are falling out laughing, these grown men. And then they say, would you do it again, please? And I'm thinking, like I said, good little child actor. Yes, what would you like me to change? And they said, nothing. Just read the thing about the house again. Oh my God, what have I done? So I read the thing. My home is the best home. They wanted to see if it was a fluke or if I could do that twice. And that was it. I was hired that day. We got home and the agent was on the phone. It was all over. I mean, I was hired on the spot, it was just, what does that say? I mean, I'm hoping it says I was a good actress, but it's like, yes, I walked in and they said, you're Nellie Oleson. So, I apparently really killed it. It was that funny.
Well, I can understand their reaction because let me tell you, your facial expressions on the show, even you don't have to speak a word. Your facial expressions were hysterical and they spoke volumes. They did the acting for you sometimes. It was so funny and amazing. Now, was Nellie Oleson actually based on anybody in Laura Ingalls Wilder's real life?
Yeah, and it's really weird because there's a girl who's named Nellie Owens who lived in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, that went to school with Laura Ingalls and apparently gave her a hard time, and they were big rivals. But what gets weirder is, so she's writing the books and she's thinking she mostly wrote favorably about people, but she did merge characters. Like Mr. Edwards is kind of based on more than one person. Some guy from Tennessee is not named Edwards or Isaiah. And so there's a little mix and match in some of her timelines. Laura Ingalls' books are actually awful with timelines. If you read Pioneer Girl or Prairie Fires or any of the historical stuff about Laura, she just mixes it like, well, what she does when they go to Kansas, when they do Little House on the Prairie. They've been Little House in the Big Woods, and then they go off to Kansas, Little House on the Prairie. And she never says her age. And in Little House on the Prairie, she's having these conversations with her parents and talking about Indians and all the, and she's like defending them, going, but aren't we on their land? And like arguing for Native American rights with her mother. And you're going, isn't she like 5? Wait, what? And so you're thinking, well, she must be like 8 or 9 or something. She was 3 when they went to Kansas. None of this stuff she describes her doing as a child in Kansas ever freaking happened because she was 3. She didn't do all those things. Those were things a 9-year-old girl would be doing. What she did was like pulling stuff from Wisconsin, and all the stuff that was happening in Big Woods didn't actually happen, obviously, prior to Little House of the Prairie, because she was like 3. It's when they went back, when it didn't work out in Kansas, and they went home to Wisconsin. And so really the book should be in the other. So there you go. So it's all over the map. When she wrote On the Banks of Plum Creek, several books in, and the character of Nellie Oleson appeared, people went nuts. It was like a craze then, just like everybody went, oh, what is that girl? People were like, who is that girl? When the books came out in the 30s. And when she started writing more books, people said, we want more Nellie. So there she is. Now she's all the way up to By the Shores of Silver Lake in a little town on the prairie. And she's like in high school. Oh, all of a sudden, Nellie Oleson miraculously suddenly shows up in South Dakota. Well, what happened is there was another girl, 2 girls actually, who gave her a hard time and tried to steal El Manzo from her. And that was Stella Gilbert and Genevieve Masters. So she actually took Genevieve and Stella and Nellie and like made them into one person so that she could say Nellie Oleson continued through the book because the fans went wild. They want more Nellie. Meanwhile, Nellie Owens is somewhere in Oregon. Her family's moved to Tillamook and they're big in cheese. And the real Nellie married a guy named Henry Curry. was a steamboat captain up in the Pacific Northwest, and she had 3 children, and she got divorced. Scandal at the time, long time ago. And so there's a whole history. I think there's a book actually out there called The Three Faces of Nellie that's all about the history of these girls and Nellie's descendants. It's all really complicated. But yes, there's a real Nellie, but there's also a gal named Genevieve and a gal named Stella who technically, or as I like to say with great pride, it took 3 people to be me.
So you had multiple personalities then on the show.
Personalities, clearly. Now, I didn't know this then. In fact, I don't think really anybody knew about the 2 other girls except hardcore historians till many years later when people started really digging. I think people in South Dakota did because they knew Genevieve and Stella. They were like, wait a minute, that's Genevieve. So they knew, people in South Dakota, but only the most hardcore librarian historians really followed this at all until a few years ago. And now everyone's talking about it. But indeed, there really was an Nellie Owens. So all of the people in her books, some of them, like Ma and Pa and Mary and Carrie, are, yes, this is that person exactly. But some of them are 2 or 3 people.
Oh, okay. And so how did Michael Landon come up with the concept of this? Was he reading the books?
His kids were, and also Ed Friendly, the producer of the show, his daughter was reading the books. Michael's daughters were reading. So everybody's kids were reading these books, and a whole generation of women, because it came out in the 30s. So that whole group, and then they were huge again in the 50s. So this huge thing, and they came out every few years again in the 70s. So a whole generation of women had grown up reading the books, and these were the same women who watched Bonanza and fell in love with Little Joe as young women. And so now they were moms with young kids. And so what a brilliant idea to make the show of Little House on the Prairie, their beloved childhood books that they read cover to cover and memorized, with their favorite sex symbol, Little Joe, as Charles. Ah! So that's why our largest audience was women 40 plus. So it was very calculated. NBC was giving Michael a show. You just come up and answer, have a show. And they wanted him to be anything but that. They were policeman, detective, those kind of things. It was the 70s. He said, no, I want to do this. He found out that this guy, Ed Friendly, had optioned the rights to the books and had been trying to sell them and hadn't been able to because his kid had read them and he went, this is a hot property. And Michael's like, no, I know about the books too. Yeah, can we do this? And they wound up going into business together because Michael said, this is what I want to do. And they said, but Charles had a beard. You don't grow a beard very well. You're going to grow. I'm playing him without a beard. Charles wasn't really that good looking. No, he's going to be sexy and takes his shirt off all the time. So he said, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be the biggest hit in the world. And they thought he was crazy. And NBC was like, they almost didn't want to do it. But he insists. He said, I that's what I want to do. I will leave. I won't do it. I want Little House on the Prairie. And they thought he'd gone mad. And of course he was right. And it ran for 9 years and is still in reruns all over the world in 140 countries.
That's right. So he knew what he was doing, right? Now, did he catch...
He actually, he told Dean Butler this, he told Melissa Gilbert this, he told several people this. He said towards the end of the show, when we're all long gone, people will still be watching the show long after we've all died.
That's right.
And they said, they all kind of went, cuckoo. Of course, he was right. Nobody believed him. They all went, oh, come on. No, he knew, he absolutely knew what he was doing.
Did he ever catch any flack for the fact that it didn't coincide with the books completely? Did people ever say, but that didn't happen in the books?
Yeah, they're still mad. There's 3 camps and they don't speak to each other. There's the hardcore show people who only love the show, and some of them didn't even read the books. And if they did, they're like, yeah, whatever. Well, it brought me to the books. It brought me to the writing. It brought me to literature and to Laura Ingalls Wilder. It made me become a student of history and literature. Great. The funniest is if you go to Walnut Grove, lovely place. All the sites where she lived have museums and events, great stuff. And the woman who runs a museum said her favorite moment is when some woman is dragging her husband or boyfriend through the museum and showing him all the exhibits. And finally, like an hour in, he goes, wait, you mean that stuff was real? Like he just thought it was a show. So you have the show people. Then you have the book people. And there's a camp of book people who don't like the show, who are very mad at the show. They go, no, the show took way too many liberties. Half that stuff never happened. They introduced major characters. The Ingalls didn't adopt a guy named Albert. What is this Albert? Mary didn't get married and have children. She was blind. It was the 1800s. You could get a husband back then. So they're just like livid that giant liberties were taken. But as Michael said, there's an entire chapter in there on how to make an apple fritter. I'm not filming that. The books are a little slow. I mean, it would have been over really quickly because the books only take up so much time. I mean,
Right.
in 3 years, we'd have been all the way up to, Silver Lake. It's like, what are you going to do? So they had to drag it out. So some of the book people are very upset. Then there's the hardcore historical people, and they think the book people are crazy as well as the show people because they know that half the stuff in the books didn't happen. So that's always fun when they get on. They have different groups on Facebook, and watching them yell at each other is quite entertaining.
So you did the most of the filming in the summers, is that right?
Sadly, yes. Well, that meant the kids were out of school because we had to do like 4 hours work and 3 hours school and 1 hour rest and recreation. And so during the summer, it was less of a hassle for us. And then it was also lovely out in Sydney because as I say, it doesn't rain in California except like right now we're having a freaking hurricane monsoon coming in. In the winter, in like November and February, it rains like mad. And when it does rain, we would have like huge floods out in Sydney. It was a total nightmare. We'd have to rearrange the whole schedule. So yeah, the summer, they love shooting in the summer. But that meant out in Simi Valley, which incidentally, Big Sky Ranch and Simi, practically every show you see is shot. There's so much is filmed there. So many movies, so many TV shows, commercials. You're flipping channels and you're seeing where we filmed like 8, 9 times a night. It was so hot in the summer out there in Simi, easily 110 degrees. And remember, this wasn't digital. This was Panavision 35 millimeter film. So we're talking big 10K hot lights and reflectors and stuff. So no, we were just frying out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you're in those pioneer wardrobes and it's not like you're wearing Daisy Duke shorts and tank tops.
No, and I'm in the foo-foo fancy. The other girls had like just one layer of calico and a slight petticoat. I'm in my petticoat must have weighed 25 pounds. It was like layers of stuff. And then I had the dress and they went all the way down to the sleeves and the lace collars and I had the wig. They tried curling my hair for the first couple of months and it was I don't know the girl. It was a disaster. And my hair was so light. So I slept in curlers. I came in at 4 a.m. They spent an hour with hot curling irons torturing me into this brilliant wig. And it looked great. And then after a few months of that, they said, we're having a wig made. So custom made wig, very elaborate process. It did look good. Absolutely the most uncomfortable thing ever to be worn on anyone's head. Just awful. Big metal comb in the front. So it was like, ow, 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 the pins. And so it hurt and it was really hot. But I looked fabulous. So, what are you going to do?
So you're writing your book. And by the way, can you tell everybody the name of this wonderful book?
My book is called Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated.
That is the best title.
Well, I had started because I've been doing stand-up comedy since I was like 15. And then in around 2002, I started doing a one-woman show, which was all true stories and a lot of stuff about being an ex-child star and we called it Confessions of a Prairie Bitch. And it was just like, oh, what a hilarious thing to call it. And my website was called Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, that the brilliant Howie Green had done for me. And this sort of escalated. And so when it was time to do the book, they're like, yeah, you're calling it Confessions of a Prairie Bitch. Yes, okay. And so then How I Survived Nellie. So HarperCollins was like, best title anybody's brought in. And they loved it right away. They're like, yes. I had 4 sample chapters. They're like, is the rest of the book like this? So I'd hit a nerve. I told the truth. I mean, there was some stuff that was in my one-woman show, but then obviously a lot of more serious stuff from my life and from the making of the show and everything else. And I just like cut to the chase and spit it out, just spill. And then also it was funny because I can't tell a story, even a horrible, sad story, without somehow it turning out funny. So that sort of worked out very well for the book.
So you were in the 8th grade when Little House began?
7th. I was just starting 7th. I was at Bancroft Junior High. And I remember, I guess, it was spring, right? Because it was so, May, I got the gig. And because the pilot hit in March. And so we were going to start shooting like late May, early June. And so it was May. And I just started the 2nd semester. And I remember I just made a potholder in art class. It's very exciting. And I didn't get a chance to tell my mother about the potholder because I got a show. The things took precedence. It was crazy. In fact, that I talked about in the book. It tells you exactly when I got the part because my mother came home from work, and by then, I already had the show. We were also. I didn't get a chance to tell my mother I'd gotten a series because it was the day of the SLA, the whole Patty Hearst thing, when the SLA had a shootout with the SWAT team in Los Angeles. And it was complete wall to wall news coverage. We could see the smoke from our apartment building and everything. And so pretty much we were glued to tube and was like, by the way, I got a show in the middle of it. I got scooped. I got scooped by the SLA and couldn't tell my mother I got a job for like 4 hours.
So now you're a TV star. How do your classmates react? How do your teachers react?
Well, thank God I was going to Bancroft Junior High with a bunch of kids who I'd known really since the fourth grade. So they already knew me. So I was just Alison to them. And it was also in Hollywood. People's parents were producers, directors, newscasters, singers. We had several famous people's kids going to there and several other actors going there. So it wasn't unusual. And a popular thing in junior high and high school at that time was to get a group together and go watch tapings of Happy Days up at Paramount on Friday night. So they were very showbiz kids. So they weren't overly excited or impressed. And I was considered kind of dorky and silly. My friends like me, but new friends were like, oh, that nerd. So it's like, you got a show. Oh, what's Little House on the Prairie? It was like, why can't I literally had a friend ask me a couple years in, why can't you be in a good show like Joni Loves Chachi? And, this is where their mindset was. So they weren't particularly impressed. They were like, oh well, finally you got work. You're always going on auditions. And then I would be absent a lot because I would leave, and I was in about half the episodes, like 7 out of 13. So I would disappear for 3 weeks, reappear, be there for 2 weeks, be gone for 2 days, come back, be there for 2 days, be gone for 3 weeks, and then come back for like a month. And it didn't make any sense. And so they were kind of like, where have you been? Oh, that show. You're making that show. And some of them thought it was fairly funny because I was more shy and more the girl who got beat up by bullies. And now I was playing the biggest bully in the world. So my friends were like, okay, that's hilarious because you're like hideous on the show. That's great. So it worked out.
And your TV parents were Harriet and Nels Oleson, played by the wonderful Catherine McGregor and Richard Bull. What was it like having them as your TV parents? And did they offer you a lot of advice about acting?
Well, Catherine sure did. They were lovely people. They were very parental, very parental. It was great. I mean, I had parents, but they were like jumping in. Now, Catherine was too much. Well, come on, she was Mrs. Oleson. She was nicer than Mrs. Oleson, but she was very opinionated and out there, and the personality of Mrs. Oleson in that she was very bossy. She would have absolutely, gone over my parents' head and tried to tell me what to do. She constantly wanted to talk about what I should wear and where I should go and what I should eat and who I should date. And it was like, okay, y'all rein it in. And then she was always giving advice on acting to the other actors, to the adults. And some people liked it. Now, some of the newer folk, like when Dean Butler started the show, and he was just out of college, Almanzo, he was like, great. He like pulled up a chair and got out of pen, said, fill me in. But like Richard Bull, who was like in the same age group as Catherine and had studied at the Goodman School in Chicago and had been in theater as long as Catherine. He'd done just as many plays as Catherine, some of them in bigger theaters. He was probably a bigger theater actor than even she was. And he also had much more TV experience. Richard was in, oh gosh, he was in like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and I think he'd been on Bonanza, and you'll see a lot of Little House people in Twilight Zone, whereas Catherine hadn't been on TV that much. Catherine starts like day one coming up to Richard, and she knew him. They'd met, they'd been in similar acting classes, and she's like, hey, I think in this scene you should go, whoa, no. You're not going to direct me. Are you out of your mind? And he said, I love you, but you're not directing me. Come on, honey. And she was like, harumph. But she had an opinion about how, I remember once she literally said something when I said, but the director said such and such. And she said, he's just a director. What does he know? It's like, a Catherine moment. Not that her advice was bad. I mean, some of it was really good. There was just a lot of it. And interestingly, one of the directors, because mostly it was Michael directed, and then Bill Claxton and a couple other people were allowed to direct. Victor French, our misdirector, he directed, and he was brilliant. And Claxton actually took me aside and said, I think you may be worried you're going to do too much. You're going to have to hold back, as you said, the fabulous facial expressions. It's like, please, more and more. And he's like, you can relax and go a little crazier with this. It's fine. He said, I know I'm always telling Catherine to tone it down, but it's Catherine. She starts like, here. So of course I'm telling her to tone it down. I'll take it down a notch because she's just so big. He says, you're not, no matter what you did, you couldn't physically be as big as she's being. That's never going to happen. He said, if you ever reach that level, I'll tell you to rein it in. He said, but you're quite safe. And also you're in a scene with her. You got to bring it up when you seriously. And I thought, well, he has a point. He has a point. So I went a little nuttier, and I think that helped.
Now on the show, everybody knows that Nellie tortures Laura mercilessly. But in real life, you and Melissa Gilbert were actually great friends.
We bonded right away. I mean, day one. I mean, she knew who everyone was, what was going on the set, because she'd already been there for the pilot and an episode. So she's like, come with me. And it's like, give me the tour of the place. Now that's so and so. This is on. I'm like, telling me who's in charge around here. And she's like, 9. And I was like, who is this kid? And we hit it off because she came from a big showbiz family. Because her dad was Paul Gilbert, the actor, and her grandfather was Harry Crane, who created the Honeymooners, for heaven's sake. So she grew up in a showbiz family. You go on YouTube, the old Dean Martin shows and those kind of things. There's Melissa as like practically a toddler in her little Christmas dress with ribbons in her hair at the party scene on like Dean Martin and stuff. She was born into a big showbiz family and knew everybody. So it was a similar background, having celebrities eat dinner at your house, going to sets. This was not new. So now she was the famous one, and we were both in a similar kind of position. And so we were kind of like little old ladies. We were like, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, but children. So we bonded right away, which is crazy considering how much we were trying to kill each other during the week and then having slumber parties at each other's house.
And what was your relationship like with the rest of the cast, like the other kids or the actors your age?
Pretty good. I mean, as we said, Melissa Sue Anderson's mom, when we played Mary, was very protective, and I think she thought Melissa Gilbert and I were juvenile delinquents, and I was like, don't hang out with them. And she's even said later in life that she was a little shy and that she was a little intimidated being on this big show, and she was not sure what to do. And her mom and said, well, no, don't be fraternizing with those child actors. So, okay. So she didn't want to get too involved, and so we're sitting there going, we're going to a party. Do you want to come with me? No. So no takers. So she seemed to us at the time, and teenage girls, standoffish. And I mean, imagine taking 3 girls 12, 13, and 14 and locking them in a soundstage together for several years. Middle school girls. You know what they're like. Put them on a TV show together. Yikes. So sparks flew. But generally, we really got along, and having all the kids in the schoolroom, and we kept the same kids because they weren't just extras. Many of the schoolroom kids that you see are the children of crew members, the lighting people, the cameraman. Their kids and grandkids are in it. So they weren't going anywhere. So we kept the same kids for years. Very unusual. So we had a group. We knew each other. We had people to talk to, which was a nice support system for young people. And the grown-ups were all cool. Like I said, Richard and Catherine were so kind to me. Richard was amazing. Richard was very fatherly. Even later in life, I mean, years later, I was having lunch with him in Chicago and telling him how I was incorporated and had a business now. And he said, I'm so glad you've become a good businesswoman. We were so worried you'd grow up to be a flibberty gibbet. you are Nels Olson. Okay. And so yes, he was very giving me very good advice. So it was lovely, really. I've met a lot of people from a lot of other TV shows, and the gist of it I've gotten from everyone in Hollywood is the people in Little House got along and are much friendlier to each other than almost any show. Like the Waltons and Gilligan's Island, maybe, are the only two I know that like each other this much.
And we can't go through this interview without talking about the amazing Michael Landon. What was it like working with him?
One of the funniest people I ever met. Absolutely very driven, absolutely brilliant, writing the show, directing the show, producing the show, starring in the show, and then going on to do Highway to Heaven and just nonstop. I don't think he ever slept, which I think he would have been he would have driven you crazy to live with him. When he got divorced, and everyone was very shocked, I wasn't that surprised because like I remember thinking he's great. I wouldn't want to be his wife or one of his kids or actually live with this guy in my house for like any amount of money because he was so shot from a gun and so workaholic and very funny, but a little crazy. And I later met Carol the guy who Carol Spinney, who was Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
Right.
And so we had a whole conversation about Jim Henson and Michael Landon. I, of course, big Muppets fan, love Jim Henson, and Carol Spinney said, "Oh my God, I loved everything Michael Landon did. Tell me everything about Michael Landon." I'm like, "You're kidding!" Or Michael Landon, I'm like, huge Prairie fan. So we compared notes. We went, "Wow, these guys were like brothers." Jim Henson, as we know, worked and worked and worked. And when he got sick, he didn't go to the doctor. Remember, he got very ill. It was like a meningitis thing. Michael almost did that one year. He got the flu and would go to the doctor, had to be dragged, kicking and screaming. And both of them were so driven and so obsessed with their work they would let personal relationships or their health even be sacrificed. They would just go and very very brilliant, but a little and so there was so much in common. But I enjoyed working with Michael. As I said, terribly funny. His instincts, he worked a lot on instinct, a lot of the casting. He cast really everyone. He was instrumental in the casting. We had, Susie McCrae casting, but she would bring people in. But Michael would say, I want that person. And the network would say, well, they have to get network approval. No, I've already hired them. And he didn't care what network approval said. If he cast people sometimes after talking to them for 5 minutes. Yeah. Like you're hired. It was like, wait, what did I do? And he made up his mind right away. So a lot of instinct and impulse. And he would change scenes. He'd say, I've changed my mind. I think we should do the scene this way. And we'd all go, all right. And it was right. And he was right every time. So, what are you going to do?
He was a prankster, I know, but he was also a no-nonsense person on the set. Is that right? I mean, when he got down to business, he meant business.
That was the whole dichotomy thing that was so strange because he would be absolute practical joker and giggling like a girl with that high pitch, like, and telling like the worst like dad jokes. Oh my God, you ever heard? And then 2 seconds later, okay, we need to do the scene now. Okay, everybody quiet on the set. And then it was like clang, and you did your job. And little kids, I mean, little kids on the show all showing up for work and hitting their mark and knowing their lines and doing their job. And I talked about in the book that one of the assistant directors wanted to give the kids candy and gum, and Michael's like, no, they're actors. They work here. They're getting paid like everybody else. Like, but that was the thing. He felt it was insulting to be handing out candy and gum like we're little trained animals, that we were deserving of respect and dignity, that we were actors and we were held to a high standard. And we were held to a very high standard on that show. And I think it shows. I think you see how most of the people from Little House Prairie turned out. And I think it worked out.
So after a few seasons, your character ends up getting married to Percival. Now, was this the beginning of the end of your time on Little House?
Yeah, because bottom line, my contract was for 7 years. And it's like, do you stay? Do you not stay? But it was also, in my case, all actors question, well, should I stay on this show that's secure? Should I have time to do other things, other projects? And in my case, I'd been there since I was 12 and I was now 19. So it's like, my God, no, I have to do something else. I mean, as an actress, I got to go do another thing. I'm 19 days. It's ridiculous. And then also like, I was in junior high and then high school, and I'm now out of school. And I moved out of my parents and I bought a condominium. My braces went on my teeth. My braces have come off my teeth, and I'm still on this show. So like I was like, I live here. So yeah, I kind of want to move on. But yeah, I got to marry Percival, which was wonderful. The brilliant actor Steve Tracy, and we had so much fun. People who are married to each other on TV either love each other or hate each other. It's like, you're either Bob Newhart and Suzanne Plachette, or and so we adored each other. But the 7 years came up, and the usual turn of events where the manager and the agent get into it with the suits for the network. And not with Michael, but the suits from the network. And they're like, no, we're not doing raises. No. Well, can I have more time off? No. Okay, well, then more episodes. No. Well, can we do this? No. And everything was take it or leave it. It was kind of like, really? My agent even said, I've been doing this for decades, and I've never had anyone who just like didn't want to negotiate or like do any back and forth. He's like, so it's not really a good deal. He says, do you want to stay? They want you to stay another 4 years. And I'm like, it was 2 years. If I'd known it was only going to 2 years, I might have done it. But 4 more years, it's like, good heavens. So I said, no, I want to do other things. And I want you to get out and do theater and other TV shows, which I wound up doing. But the ironic part is years later when Michael was negotiating Highway to Heaven, and you remember my Highway to Heaven moved. It was at NBC and it moved to CBS. That's because he was negotiating and they sent him the same guy, literally not just a network suit, but the same actual guy who had called my agent and been so horrible to negotiate with. And they put him on the phone. And after that, Michael said, I'm pulling the show and going to another network. That's how bad that guy was. So there you go. So not my fault. But it's hard to be on a show for 7 years. 7 years is an insanely long time to do anything. And as a young person, to go through your whole formative years and then say, well, do you want to just stay here? That was kind of a terrifying prospect. So I'm glad I went when I did. I guess if someone would have told me it will only be 2 more years and then you will be done, I might have hung out for that. But the prospect was that I would stay for 4 years and then that would get renewed. And I would be Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke. It would be forever and ever. And I was like, no,
But Nellie did come back for an episode, correct?
back. And that's another thing. Never in Hollywood. In Hollywood, no, 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 no. You leave. You left a show. Your contract ended. You said goodbye. You refused the deal. They would never speak to you again. Any show, they never speak to you again. No, my agent gets a call. Can she come back? We'd like to have her visit for an episode because we added the sister. We thought it'd be really funny. And the girl who technically is replacing me. Oh, would she like to come back and do a big thing? It's like a huge major two-parter season thing where she meets up with the girl we basically hired to be her. Could you? And it's like, nobody does this. And my agent was like, oh, how much are we talking? And so I did. I wound up going back. Of course, my agent also said, I couldn't believe how much they paid you to do that. I should have asked for twice that. I didn't know they were willing. He said, if they were paying that kind of money when we were negotiating, you just stayed for 4 years. So it was very crazy. But again, that's not normal in Hollywood. But Michael was like, no, I think we should bring her back for an episode with Nancy. And he was right. It was genius. It was great. And I had a good time and totally worked out. It was a brilliant idea.
And that was an awesome episode, by the way.
Exactly.
Did it make you miss playing Nellie, or were you still, nah, I want to hang up the bonnet?
It was really cool to go back and see everybody. It's interesting when you watch it. There's all these scenes with Laura and the various folks in the town saying, oh, we've missed you, and hugging and carrying on. That there was no acting. There was like no acting. Everybody was happy to see me. I was happy to see them. We were like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in ages, and hugging each other. It's like, wait, was that in the script? I know. Who knows? So yes, it was very realistic because I got to come in for a visit and hang out with everybody for a week. And I got to meet the fabulous Alison Arngrim, who played Evil Nancy. A lot of people really hate her because she was so objectionable. Marvelous girl, very smart. She specifically said, I grew up watching you and I didn't want to do the exact same thing. So I had to do something else. I mean, you kind of went with bitchy, so I thought I'd go with crazy. And I said, nailed it. Yes, you have succeeded. Wow. So yeah, no, I thought she was brilliant. She absolutely, that was all on purpose. She knew exactly what she was doing, that she was totally like Patty McCormick, bad seed, annoying, that she was that creepy. That's what she was going for. And she completely succeeded.
Now, you always hear about actors. I've always heard that actors sometimes don't want to be identified with their TV counterpart. Do you still like being known for Nellie? I mean, because there are some people, as I read in your book about a woman, I think you were at a meet and greet and or an autograph, and she came up to you and said, I forgive you, because you've endured a lot of bullying because you were Nellie, and how dare you be so mean to Laura?
Oh, people are mad at me, really personally angry at me for things I did 50 years ago while pretending to be somebody else. It's not normal. And it's interesting because I literally just this morning, I was watching the thing, we lost Adam Rich the other day from Eight Is Enough, who was a lovely person. He had, of course, had very famous in the 80s and 90s drug problems, but he had been clean and sober many, many years and was a really cool dude and like helping a lot of other people. Well, since his passing, they've been showing that thing from, was it child star Dickie Roberts, where a bunch of child actors sing this whole song about being a child actor, ex-child star, and people annoying them. And the running theme is stop calling me by my character name. Every single actor in it mentions something some of them quite literally, because I know some of them, and they did where people got annoyed about being called their character. Stop calling me that silly name of character. If you call me that name one more time, I swear. And I thought, so what this is kind of putting out is like the biggest annoying thing is getting called by your character name. But wait, what if you thought it was funny and it didn't bother you? Oh, I've always thought Nellie was hilarious, that she was one of the greatest characters in TV. I thought Little House was one of the best shows ever, which I guess since they're rerunning it ad nauseum all over the earth, I guess it is. I liked being Nellie. And I had a positive experience on the set. Yes, there's people when they were young, they didn't want to be there and they weren't having any fun and there weren't other kids and they were miserable. They were bored out of their minds and totally miserable on their shows. And it was not fun for them to be on the show they were on. I was having a very good time on the set that I was on. And so that's different then. I enjoyed being Nellie. I didn't hate being, I liked it. And if I watched the show, I probably would have tuned in for the episodes with Nellie and Mrs. Oleson. I like the character. So for me, even 1,000 years later, people calling me Nellie, talking about the show, I think it's odd sometimes because we're coming up on literally the 50th anniversary. This year's 49 years since the show aired. And I think it's kind of surreal and literally, yes, a grown person coming up to me and I forgive you. I'm like, wow, have you considered therapy? But I think it's funny as hell. And as I said, I like Nellie. So for me, it's a compliment. And then as an actor, actors are always saying, I want people to believe that I am the character. I want the audience to suspend disbelief. I don't want them to feel they're watching TV or in a movie theater. I want them to totally leave reality, be sucked into the plot completely and believe that I'm really this character and this stuff's really happening. Isn't that's supposed to be the ultimate goal? So what? I apparently did it. I pulled it off. There's people watch this show and were so emotionally hit by Little House that they believe all the characters are real. You should hear how they talk to everyone else. They believe that it really happened, that these characters were real. That's why the book people, the TV people have such a hard time. They're like, what? No, there's totally an Albert. I saw him. It's like, no, there's not. They believed it happened. They believed I'm really that person and this is all real. That's supposedly the ultimate achievement in acting. So when people come up and say, I hated you so much, you made me so angry, I go, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're so kind. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
But not when they throw things at you. You've had things thrown at you.
It's like, no, don't throw things. I've had people throw things. Yes, I got hit in the face with an orange soda during the Hollywood Santa Claus Lane Christmas parade. Right in the face. Like, Merry Christmas, back right in the face. And even then, I kind of went, wow. Because it was like, they were so mad. I didn't do it. They're talking about a completely fictional character on a television show, and they were so emotionally moved that they threw a soda at my head.
But like you said, that's a testament to your wonderful acting skills.
Yeah, nobody watched that and said, I mean, on the downside, a lot of us on Little House didn't get the Emmys or the appreciation from the industry that we probably should have had because people weren't watching it saying, what a brilliant performance. They were all watching it going, oh, this is real. These are actually these people and this is happening. Which is like, oh, great. But they don't give you an Emmy if they think it's really you.
That's right. So what was your life like after the Prairie? What did you go on to do?
So many things. So after the show, I did the usuals. I did Love Boat. I was on Fantasy Island, all that kind of crazy stuff. And then I stand-up comic. I started doing stand-up comedy, like I said, teenager down at the Comedy Store in the Improv. And I was able to do that and tour the country doing stand-up, which was fun. And then I got into dinner theater, big thing back then. There still now are like regional theaters. In fact, I just did a play in November in North Carolina. It's sort of the modern dinner theater, these various regional theaters. But literally it was a huge thing back in the 70s and 80s was you would go to this enormous theater and you'd buy a special package dinner thing and you'd get a lavish dinner and then you'd sit and watch a play with usually some celebrity flown in. And I was that person. And it was great fun. It paid very well. You got to do sort of really legitimate theater. You got to do plays and the food was really good. And you just go afterwards and eat in the kitchen, whatever they'd serve that night. It's lovely. And you got to travel. So I was traveling and doing this kind of stuff. And then in, of course, the 80s when Steve Tracy, Percival, got sick because he died of AIDS in 1986. And when he went public with his diagnosis, I started volunteering AIDS Project Los Angeles and other agencies. And so I became an AIDS activist. I was going all over the country to educate people about how it's transmitted, how to protect themselves, how to help their friends who were sick, and helping little tiny AIDS agencies. Like, LA and New York, they could call up Madonna or Liz Taylor, but Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and these places in Missouri that have AIDS projects for people with HIV/AIDS that Madonna's not coming, and the little place. So I would go and do huge fundraisers for these small projects that were helping people out in the country, and go all over the country and do this. And that's when I found out there were all these places like the real Walnut Grove, the real Missouri, the Mansfield, Missouri, where Laura lived with Almanzo. And I started doing like the Prairie circuit, started doing that. So I started traveling, doing all these speaking gigs and things. And that sort of escalated. And then really in the 90s, I guess it was the DVDs coming out. I think it was all the nostalgia shows. I was on I Love the 70s like several times. And then they actually made like a comedy bumper with me. Like, what was it about? Oh, yes. It was people who hadn't aged well, and I would pop up and go, makeup, the big powder puff, very silly stuff. So I was on Where Are They Now? And I Love the 70s, and Child Actors Then and Now. I did every single one of those shows. And some people didn't want to do them. I'm like, oh, come on. I did them all. A friend of mine called me, late 90s. She said, could you get off of my television? I said, what? She said, would you just please get off of my television for 5 minutes? I said, what are you talking about? She says, so I turn on my TV. And it's I Love the 70s on VH1. And there you are, yapping away. She says, I changed the channel, and there's a public service announcement about HIV and AIDS. Oh, wait, it's you. And I change the channel again. Child Actors Then and Now, a serious interview show with Melissa Gilbert and Alison Arngrim. And there you are. She said, I change it again. It's a rerun of Little House. I change it again. It's the public service station. And it's, the show AIDS Vision you did, interviewing people about AIDS and HIV. She said, I can't get you off the TV. I'm changing the channel, and it's you on every channel. And I was like,
and then she walked into a bookstore, and there's your book. So what inspired you? What inspired you to be a writer and to want to write your memoir?
Well, I'd always written, is what's funny. And that's what I said, the impetus, things really built up in the 90s. And then what happened in 2000, then I launched Confessions of Prairie Bitch, the show, because I said, I'm going to just tell all true stories, and what the hell, and I'll do a question and answer segment. That'll give them something to do. And of course, they love that. So I'm answering all these fan questions. So I'm really finding out what people really, really want to know. I'd always written, I had been published in 2 magazines. I'd been published in Designers West and Frontiers, an article about AIDS, about HIV and AIDS and activism. So I had written and been in magazines, so and I was writing my stand-up act, and I wrote my one-woman show, and I was doing the show when a literary agent shows up and says, is there a book to go with this show? I'm like, could be. And everyone, my friends had all said, please say you're writing a book. Please say you're taking notes, because this is all like too funny, everything that happens to you. And I did. And so I started writing. I said, yes, I am working on the book. And we met. And next thing I know, he's got me meeting with publishers, and kablooey, I wind up with HarperCollins. And then I had to crank out the rest of it. It's a lot of work writing a book. If anyone out there is thinking of writing a book, you absolutely do it. It's really cool, but it is so much work and very time consuming and exhausting. You really have to put yourself out there. If you want to write something and you want people to think it's funny, if you're not laughing while you're writing it, if it doesn't strike you funny, if you don't have to stop writing because you're going, oh my God, that was hysterical, no one else is going to think it's funny either. And if while you're writing, you don't tear up and need to get Kleenex and go, okay, this is kind of upsetting, and start crying, nobody else is going to think it's sad either. You can't just go, I think this part is sad. And it's no, you have to go through it. And you have to sort of stick to certain themes. Like if you realize, oh, this is kind of about this and this, get little yellow Post-its and just stick those up on the computer. What did I, something about whatever it was before, it's funny now. It's very gay. It's very French, which of course I went up with a gay French literary agent company that offices in Paris and New York. So it's like, they don't understand me. Who will? Know who are you talking to when you're writing a book? I knew who I was talking to. I'd met my fans. I'd been out there. I had met my fans, and I'd heard their questions. So I knew exactly who I was talking to and what they were like, and I knew exactly what they wanted to know, which is a real thing. a major convenient thing that a lot of people don't have. So if you can get out there and meet your audience, because you're telling this to someone and you're not just writing, you're talking to someone, you're telling someone a story, and you need to know who your audience is so you can explain it to them properly. If you're just saying, well, who's your book for? I don't know, everybody. No. So I knew who I was talking to. And then, of course, it wound up having an even wider appeal than I ever imagined. But that's because I went, you got to focus. It's hard to write about, but there you are. And then the editing process is a whole nightmare.
Oh, yes. I'm a writer. I've written 2 books. I'm on my 3rd now.
Right?
So I hate the editing.
Ooh, and then the editing, and you have an editor if but so you have this woman you get on the phone with, and I, like a dummy, think, oh, editing, great, it's going to be about cutting things. No, sometimes it's adding things. So she calls it, well, we need to merge these 4 chapters. I'm like, what? Yes, we have to. Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, they're kind of long. So she said, look, I'm going to work on this tonight, see if I can put these 4 chapters together, but I don't want to leave anything out important. So I'll send this to you tomorrow, and you tell me if I've left anything out. And I go, well, no. Yes, that's really good, that segue, but we really need to keep that story. Okay, you put it back in. Oh, and then she says, I wrote this thing, I consolidated, shortened this chapter, but could you write 10 more pages on this thing over here? Because we really like that story. What? Oh, yeah. And the publisher's called. Okay, there's this one story. And I went, you like that story of all the things in the book? Yeah, we love that. Could you expand on that? And I'm like, that was the part you like. Okay. And so it was like, write 10 pages and call me in the morning. And I thought I'd be cutting more. I seem to be writing more than I even did. But yeah, so that blew my mind. And then you go through the legal department. When you do a Hollywood memoir, there's a long conversation with the legal department about, yeah, you can't say that. Oh, you can totally say that. Oh, that's what surprised me. I'm like, oh, is this a problem? No, you can totally say that. You can say that? Yes, you can say that. You can't say this over here. What? Okay, you have to change names. Whose? Oh, no, you're not the celebrities, just these people. I have to change that name. Yeah, because it was so odd. The things that apparently are important to legal are not what we normal people would think. So that's right. What it's good. Yeah.
Do you have any plans on writing anymore? Any other memoirs or books?
I do. I've been, writing more stand-up because I'm probably having a whole new stand-up tour for 2023, going to do some more shows. And then I've been doing these crazy online shows, and I have one coming up on the 21st, Saturday afternoon, the 21st. I'll be doing from over there in that part of my living room. I'll be performing. And then people begging for the sequel to Confessions. So I guess I have actually written a bunch. I'm like, should I do it? Yes. But right now I'm excited because I can't stop writing this thing. I'm working on a cookbook, but it's not a normal cookbook. It's for people who can't cook at all and don't go in the kitchen.
Like me.
Because Nellie couldn't cook. I can cook. I love cooking. And if you go on YouTube, you will see Who's Going to Do the Cooking with Alison Arngrim. I have videos up on YouTube, and I've always cooked. I love to cook, and other people can't. So I start coming up with just insanely simple recipes and simple versions of recipes that literally, if you had no idea what you were doing, never cooked in your life, or a 10-year-old kid, if somebody helps turn on the stove, go into the kitchen, and with normal equipment, don't need anything like you see on the cooking shows. You need a bowl, a knife, a pan, and you can make really good food. I showed everybody how to make scrambled eggs one afternoon, and it took off. And so now I have cooking videos, and I'm working on the cookbook.
Oh, I got to check that out. I could use all the help I can get. So
that's many people
show.
Yeah. And people who've seen the video said this is great for college students. This is people
right.
for in their first apartment. And it's called, of course, Who's Going to Do the Cooking? Because
So why do you think Little House has endured? I mean, since 1974, this show has not been off the air at all. What do you think it is about this show that has enjoyed so much longevity?
And, it's as you're saying that, I started thinking about in 1979 or 80, towards the end of the show, could I imagine being 60 years old and someone was going to be asking me that? I'd go, no, we never thought it would go on.
First of all, you do not look 60 years old. Let me just say.
I turned 61 on the 18th. This is my birthday month. I'll be 61 in 2 weeks.
Oh, well, happy birthday, but you don't look it.
Good light. I have really good lighting. This ring light is amazing. I highly recommend my ring light. But yeah, I never would have believed it. I think there's several things going, because asked a lot when I was in France. I'm heading out there again soon. That why do people in other countries like it? Why do people in Sri Lanka watch it? Why are people in Borneo watching Little House on the Prairie? What? Because the problems of the Ingalls are the problems of the whole world. You have a poor family living in basically 2 rooms, with a ton of kids, wondering if they're going to make it through the week. And there's like the rich family in town just make their lives worse and create more problems for them. And they're always in debt, and something's always there at the mercy of the elements. This is how most people live.
Right.
People all over the world are not living like JR on Dallas or on any of these shows.
Exactly.
These sitcoms where these people have sort of average regular jobs, yet they have like a 5-bedroom freaking split level ranch house. That's a $5 million house. Where do they get that house? Nobody has that house has that job. Did they inherit money? And what was it always the joke about Friends? It's like, God, these people are barely employed and they have these New York apartments that would be thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, people on TV of this very high standard of living generally, and Ingalls do not. And people all over in other countries often live in little tiny houses with a bunch of children and wonder how they're going to eat next week. And here was a show where that's what they were doing. And people were like, I can get into that. And there was so much emotion. It was very emotionally based. It was all about love and all about heartbreak and death and life and birth. And then Mrs. Oleson, who does not have a job where they do not have a Mrs. Oleson, a Harriet at their job?
That's right.
What child in junior high, middle school does not have a Nellie Oleson at their school? Who does not have a Nellie in their class? Everybody had it. So everyone tuned in and went, oh my God, she's like the girl at my school. Oh my God, it's like the woman at my job I can't stand. And so they were like, well, we're watching this.
It was an amazing show.
And the 1800s, it didn't date. Like, love the Brady Bunch, but all them big Daisy stickers and all them cute things in the flared pants. We watch it and go, ha ha ha, because it's so 1970s. Little House on the Prairie doesn't matter. It's the 1800s. Do you know they showed it? I think they still are. There were several Middle Eastern countries that were so strict. They didn't like American shows where, too much skin. They weren't going to show, the Charlie's Angels for sure. But Little House, everyone was covered to the wrist and the neck. So they showed it in countries that didn't show other American TV shows because it was considered less scandalous. Saddam Hussein's favorite show.
The show will go on and on, like Michael Landon said, long after we are gone.
He's right. He was right. Who knew?
Alison, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I
just rambled for days, but yes, but
this
I'm glad we did talk about writing. Writing is hard, but it is gratifying. I urge everyone, if you haven't written at all, even people who say, well, I'm not going to be a writer, write something. Sit down, what I did on my summer vacation, like they made you do in school. Try it sometime. Write about a person and try to describe an event or a person or what you did in summer vacation. Close your eyes and try to describe what it sounded like, what they look like, what everything smelled like, what the food tasted like, what you heard, and literally what it felt like. And try writing that and try doing that as an exercise a few times just for kicks. It's very interesting.
Therapeutic, it's cathartic. And Alison Arngrim, you're amazing actress, writer, activist. Keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for being on Tea with Tara.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Alison Arngrim, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.